you spend it and allocate the funding instead?
Thanks, Sophie, for the question. So AUKUS is a tripartite technology agreement between Australia, the US and the UK. One of the important things about it is the sharing of technology around quantum mechanics, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, to create high-tech defence capability as a deterrence to going to war. We don't want to see war in our region. We want to make sure that that is deterred. So it's important to use those capabilities as well as diplomacy, which we've invested in, and development assistance, which we need to invest more in, and we have, given that the Trump administration has ripped $50 billion out of aid and development across the globe, which is going to impact millions of people. I want to talk about the funding for the Arts Centre, because let's have a bit of a reality check. The Greens Party in the State Parliament have taken a position that Pascoe Vale girls should be co-ed. Now, there is a hand start. Okay, there is a hand. Go and put your hands up. It's from your own the MP in the upper house, who's basically said we need to have. I'll read it to you. This has been a long-standing demand that the Expand Pascoe Girls School become co-educational. That's from Amacina Gray Barbiero. So that's your Greens MP. So I've read it exactly as it's written. Anyway, the point I'm making is this.
Focus back to Sophie's question.
But it goes to your question. It goes to your question, Sophie. Because one of the great threats, we hear a lot of great talking points, but one of the great threats to the funding for stage 2 and stage 3 of your plan is if that goes through and becomes co-educational, it changes the enrolment boundaries. This is the practical effect of it. It changes the calculus around the numbers and the premise around the growth of Coburg High. Coburg High has grown from 150 students in 2015 to over 1,000 students. Okay? And I also disagree with Sam about the point you made about funding per student. We fund per student because that's really important, and we load on top of that when there are students at disadvantage, whether it's First Nations, whether it's PAL, or whatever it might be. So I'm talking about practical realities about funding these very important programs and the very important infrastructure for your school. Politics matters. Practical realities matter. We're working hard with the state government to actually get the funding for your school going forward, as I have for all schools in the electorate. But if there is a position where that position is taken, that changes the whole of the evidence base around the growth, enrolment growth of Coburg High, and puts at risk the stage 2 and stage 3 funding. Things matter. What you say in Parliament matters, and what position you take matter. And when you're in government, you have the responsibility to follow through. You can't just say stuff and hope no one notices.
Thank you for that. We'll move to Sue. And I'll just ask people to stay focused on Sophie's question, which was about using the money that might be freed up by not going through with AUKUS as a hypothetical outcome.
Before answering that part of the question, I thought I should say why it's a good idea not to go ahead with AUKUS. Because the whole AUKUS thing, military agreement with the United States, and the Socialist Alliance believes that Australia should break its military ties with the United States and become independent. The dangers of this AUKUS military agreement is it's about military interoperability, which means it draws Australia much more deeply into the American military machine, which makes life much more difficult if America decide to go to war with China. And if you look at Australia's military expeditions, they've mostly been invasions, not defence of Australia. They've mostly been invasions. And the nuclear submarines that are part of this will bring a force and nuclear industry into Australia. So that's what the impact of the AUKUS agreement. And it's $368 billion overall price tag, but likely to be much bigger. I think there's many things you could use the funding for, and I believe that AUKUS should be axed, and the funding, the first priority is it should be used to build a massive amount of public housing, but it also needs to be used to take services back in public hands and properly fund public health and public education, because I think the privatisation agenda is nibbling away at these important public services, and then because of so many services. You know, like we saw the report on I think it was Four Corners, where 95% of childcare centres are privately owned, and some are owned by real estate companies and developers. And so for 95% of childcare centres, profit is the key motive for business, not the health and welfare of children and their families. And so I think we need to fundamentally reorient society to put service back at the heart of things rather than profit, and that's what money could be used for.
I agree with I've heard the Socialist Alliance previously has spoken about how the US is not the best, most reliable ally in the world. Most people in this room would agree with that. So a big question about the submarines is, are we ever going to get them? Is the US actually going to come and save us? And so if we, let's focus on spending it on defence instead. I think it's obvious to most people in this room that war is increasingly moving towards misinformation, cyber attacks. It's also moving towards drones and this asymmetric warfare. So the idea of buying one big expensive war machine is just becoming less of a smart investment anyway. And so if we think about how can we spend on avoiding misinformation, for instance, one of the Fusion's policies is to increase the funding of organisations like the ABC to make sure that there's proper journalism, keeping Australia informed about what's happening to us, potentially foreign media organisations as well, to avoid the current problems with the ABC where it sort of goes off course. Another aspect where Fusion's policies could help in defence is by increasing funding to the CSIRO. If we think of Taiwan, for instance, it's critically important, TSMC. Look at all the militaries around the world prepared to fight for Taiwan because it's so important, the advanced products that Taiwan produces. If Australia was to double down on our education, if Australia was to invest more in research and development, we too could become critical to the world. I would also encourage if Fusion moves towards becoming a good global citizen so that we have a more powerful seat at the negotiating table. If we rely on peace and diplomacy instead of threatening people with expensive US war equipment, then that's one of the ways that will keep us safe in the world.
Thank you for that question. I think it's a question about time. We're talking about $368 billion going to submarines that we needed to see, and heading us further on a trajectory of following the US into a war that we don't want to follow them into. We need foreign policy independence, especially now, given what's happening in the US. If we didn't have to spend that money, that's what the Greens want to see. We're going to get out of AUKUS right now. Let's get dental and mental health into Medicare. Let's make go to GP free again. Let's build the 610,000 genuinely affordable public homes that can end homelessness across this country. Let's make going to university free again and wipe out student debt. Why should they have mortgage-sized debts before they even start their young lives? Let's abolish all public school out-of-pocket fees and make sure everyone gets an $800 return to school bonus to be able to afford the books and the uniforms and all the things that they need. We can have a fully funded education system by funding all our schools across this country and making sure that every school has the infrastructure and support they need for young people to thrive. We can build youth hubs across our community to make sure young people have free, social, recreational, meaningful activity with youth workers there to support them who know them. So many young people are blamed for the problems that adults and politicians have created by depriving them of the opportunities that those same politicians had when they were young. Young people are being given a raw deal in this country right now, and it's time to turn it around. And getting out of AUKUS is such an important part of that. Budgets are about priorities. Governments suddenly find money for all their defence projects they want to spend on, but then make us beg and plead for the basics to live good lives. That's what we have on offer at this election. We can choose something different. We can choose hope. We can choose